Hello, YouTube. Welcome once again. This is Acadius, and today we have a very special video. This one was not planned because out of the blue, these people decided to announce a game and it's just in the theoretical phase. Like it's just in the planning phase. There's no gameplay. They've got bad artwork and a whole bunch of ideas, and that's it. And you know what? That is the best content for me because that is exactly the realm I love to live in, the theoretical realm. Ideas, dreams. Yes, let's get to it.
We think the right way to tackle a project as big as an MMO is to be careful about where and how we innovate. We think this is a risk when you try to innovate too much. That's what leads to a MMO with a dev cycle of 10 to 15 years, and ain't nobody up here wants that.
So, right off the bat, I kind of feel like this guy's kind of taking a shot at Ashes of Creation here. If you look at when Ashes was originally announced, it was December 10th of 2016, and then we're still not in beta yet. So it has a good chance of hitting that 10-year mark before it's fully released. We'll see. I think it'll hit like 2026 myself, but we'll see. Time will tell.
We're going to be really careful where we do innovate. A great example are several of us came from World of Warcraft, and we love WoW's Dungeons and Raids. We don't think there is a lot we need to do there differently. We'll put our own spin on it. It's a different game, it's a different IP, but overall, we're not going to spend a lot of points innovating on things like that.
Okay, so now he says he loves WoW's Dungeons and Raids. What? I mean, don't people constantly complain about dungeon design in World of Warcraft all the time? And raid design in World of Warcraft? Like, why are you going to give us more of the same? And you're not going to spend any time innovating on these dungeons and raids that people are constantly complaining about? Okay, thanks for giving us more of the same that people already complain about all the time. What are you talking about, dude? You definitely need to innovate on dungeons and raids. People are tired of it. It's getting old. And let's not forget that exploring dungeons and raids is part of the core experience of being like having the feeling of being on adventure with your friends or your guildmates. That's part of it. That's a core part of it. What are you talking about? Like those dungeons need to be more fleshed out, more realistic, and make more sense in their design, so that you have a better experience when you're going down into the dungeon with your bros, trying to freaking get some loot or whatever, and I don't think that all of World of Warcraft's dungeons really hit that mark. Some of them are just kind of stale and boring. So this guy, he's going to say some stuff later, and I'm going to take issue with it, so I'll get into it then.
However, we think adventuring, like going out into the world, doing quests, kind of figuring out where you're supposed to go next, has not aged super well, and we think that is a great opportunity to innovate. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
All right, so now he's saying that going on quests and adventuring hasn't aged well? What are you talking about? Outward did great, and that was a single player or co op game, and it was super fun. It wasn't even, you don't even have any kind of fast travel or anything in that game, and the world's pretty freaking big. You got to deal with a backpack the whole freaking time that you got to take off and put on. Freaking Elden Ring did great. And guess what? If you take the freaking bosses out, it's still fun to play the game without the bosses. It's fun to explore the world and go on an adventure with your friend. You know, that's what it's all about is adventuring. It's still the main draw of an RPG game. I know it's shocking, shocking. Here's what doesn't make any sense. The repetitive quests in the game that don't mean anything. Go collect these daffodils. Go kill these boars. That's boring. It's boring. It's not that it didn't age well. It's that it's boring. It was always boring. And it's still boring. Nothing's changed here. So I don't know what he's talking about. This crap hasn't aged well. You know, this guy's insane. Adventuring is where the fun is in an RPG. There's a reason why Dragon's Dogma is a great game and it's single player. And again, he's going to get into some stuff later that ties into this where he's super confused and it's painfully obvious.
So our game is set in a shattered world where players look out into the sky from a mysterious ancient city and see countless shards of broken worlds waiting to be discovered. This is some of our latest concept art for that setting, but I also want to show you how this has already evolved. When the team was first brainstorming about the world, I got excited and made my own sketch of how the shards might float above the city, and everyone teased me about it mercilessly. And so I drew it again in Photoshop where it looked tiny bit better, and we used this for our first several pitch decks. This is what game development looks like. It starts looking pretty bad, you make it better and better, you hire better artists who can actually draw, and eventually you should be able to produce something pretty cool. Our art teams took these concepts and got us to our latest vision, which we'll continue to experiment with further. This is by far not the final way the game will look. So you probably get the idea that one of the major focuses for us is creating two different types of world shards for players to explore. We're calling these red shards are like more traditional MMO zones with lots of danger, dungeons, and world bosses. This is where you'd find most of the dungeons and raids in the game, and other players, particularly strangers, are really important here. A player on Twitter compared them to WoW's Timeless Isle, and that's a great way to think about it. And then our blue shards will be more of a private realm for you and your friends. The design draws on some inspiration from survival games, but it's not about starving or freezing to death. It's more about you charting your own path the way you want. And while the red shards offer a consistent theme park experience for every player, the blue shards open up individualized and different sandboxes for you and whoever you choose to let in with you.
Okay, so he's going to divide the world up into shards. And then the red shards is your typical MMO experience. And then the blue shards are like private servers that you create. And you have to keep creating them over and over because the resources are limited. So then once you use up all the resources and kill all the enemies on these blue shards, you're out. Well, now you got to create another one. And the draw here, I think what he's thinking here is that you got solo players that want to play solo, like I mentioned with Outward or whatever. Okay, cool. But solo players don't want to just play by themselves. Why are they playing an MMO? Right? They want to not be guilded most of the time, right? And they want to run around and do their own thing, but then they want to have other players around them so that they feel like they're part of the social experience. It's like the people that go to a bar and then they just sit there and, do some shots and watch some TV for a few hours and then they go home. Well, they could have done that at home. Why are they doing it at the bar? Because they want to be around other people. They just don't want to maybe directly interact with those people, but they still want them around. So I think his fundamental understanding of why solo players want to do what they do is a little bit flawed here, because you're literally taking people out of the world, and so now not only are you taking them out of the world, which is what they don't really want to do, but you're also taking all those players, like you're taking all these players and forcing them to have to. I'm assuming you're going to have to at some point for something go to these blue shards. Right? Like you're not going to have a choice because there's going to be these resources that you're going to want to get. So because they exist, you would want to use them because it'd make it easier. So that takes away from the player population, which means that now the red shards don't feel like they're populated. And so when you're out there in the world playing on the campaign, you're not going to see as many people because everybody's just, being a little solo dwarf mining in their little freaking blue shard, not paying attention, and they're not there. So I don't understand. Like this, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like you're literally killing your own world with the red shards because you're adding the blue shards, right? I mean, why would you not take the easy way out? If it's easy to get the resources in the blue shards, then you're just going to do that. So whatever resources you need that you can get from the blue shards, you're going to get it from the blue shards instead of the red shards because it's easier. This makes no sense. This is actively killing your world. It's actively making your world, your red shard, pulling players out of your red shards, putting them into blue shards. So now your red shards aren't as populated. And one of the biggest problems with World of Warcraft right now is that once everybody's, gets to max level, then nobody is out in the world and the world becomes a ghost town because they don't need to leave their main hub in order to do anything anymore other than maybe, pick herbs or, go mining for materials. Other than that, then nobody needs to go out there. So whenever you do go out there, it's a ghost town. And the world is dead and soulless. It so then they're gonna make a game that right off the bat it's gonna be dead and soulless after a while, right? They're putting the mechanic in there that actively works to kill their game. It makes no sense.
The basic loop of Ghost when you play is you'll go back and forth between the blue shards and red shards. Perhaps you need important reagent for your next upgrade that can only be found in the red shards. Or maybe your friends let you know that a rare boss just appeared and that boss drops great loot, but you'll need to assemble a small army to go and dispatch it. These accomplishments are then things you can bring back to further improve your character and the blue shards. Now, we think the opportunity here is that when you're playing on a blue shard, your actions will be permanent, whether you deplete a mine or clear out a dragon's lair. If you want to build a village for you and your friends, there won't be random players walking through to mess up the experience. If you want to set up a guild versus guild PvP shard, you won't have to worry about random arrivals later on causing an imbalance. But without random players, you don't really have an MMO, right? So the red shards are where you get that massive multiplayer experience that we all love.
So this is exactly what I was talking about before. This guy thinks that solo players want to just be by themselves off farming somewhere and never see anybody else until they're ready. And they're like, oh, well, now I'm ready to, have some kind of social interaction. Let me jump on the red shard. And then when I get tired of it, I can jump back onto the blue shard and I get the best of both worlds. Yeah, but I'm sure there are people like that. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I think most of the solo players actually want to be able to look around and see other people when they're doing their little solo experience. And they're kind of near them. They're not really interacting with them, but they're there. And it makes them feel like they're part of the world. The more you look around and the less people you see, the more alone you feel. And that's not what they're looking for, which is why they're playing an MMO to start with. They could play any number of solo single player games and then they would be fine. If they didn't want a social experience, they wouldn't play an MMO. So I think this guy is really confused here. And I think it's going to hurt his game. A game that comes to mind really in the MMO world is Guild Wars. Everybody talks all this mess about Guild Wars one way or the other, but the fact remains the game did all right for a year or two, and then it just fell off the map. And now I looked at it the other day, and it's something at 18,000 players. So technically, it's slightly better than ESO, doing slightly better than ESO. And if that's the mark that they're shooting for, then I guess they're going to succeed. They'll hit their mark exactly. But if they're going for millions of players 2 or 3 years down the road with this game designed this way, they're never going to hit that mark. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're not going to design a game like this that splits your player base up between shards, which kills most of your social experience in your main shard because everybody's too busy farming their blue shards because it's easier, and then expect your game to have millions of players 2 or 3 years down the road. It's not going to happen. Never going to happen. So they may as well just forget about that if that's their mark that they're trying to hit.
Now, it's easy to talk about world shards in a way that sounds really dry or even disconnected, and honestly, systems designers are really good at doing that, which is why developing the world of Ghost is really important to us as well. Our goal is for Ghost to be immersive, mysterious, and worthy of your time and investment. We take inspiration from everything from Elden Ring to D&D's Planescape. Because we want the world of Ghost to be a fresh take on the fantasy genre, we're experimenting with a lot of different types of creatures and races you'll encounter, and that work even carries into class design. We want to have a lot of classes, and while you probably won't find something as basic as warrior or mage, some of the classes will be familiar, and then some of them will honestly be a little weird, like this room. We hope everyone can create characters and find classes that fit the playstyle they love, but alts are also core to the idea of playing Ghost, so experimenting with different classes should feel rewarding and not like you're falling behind. Our classes are organized into different factions, and these factions are working secretly against each other, sometimes with each other, to determine the future of the city. The factions don't limit who you can play with. This isn't about preventing you from playing with your friends. They're just there to give the classes some depth and motivation to help drive our narrative.
Now, first of all, this guy cannot land a joke. That was horrible. That was such a bad joke. But yeah, classes. What he's like, you don't want to get left behind when you experiment with your class. Uh, what are you talking about? Just respec, and then you put your points in. You don't like lose anything. We had that in World of Warcraft. We've had it in other games. That's not really hard to figure out here. But factions not being like preventative for you to play with your friends, that is definitely a step in the right direction. Ultima Online had it right the first time. You should not have factions that are, first of all, required for you to join. It should be an option. Like if you want to join the faction, you can. You don't have to. It's not a requirement. And even if you join the faction, it also still shouldn't prevent you from playing with your friends. Maybe they want to join the other faction. Okay, well, big deal. That should not stop you from playing with your friends. It should have always been that way. I don't know why WoW chose to do it differently. It was a terrible choice, and they've been slowly trying to get rid of that decision for the last, several years now. They finally realized, like, oh, that was a bad idea. Who would have thought? Yeah, no shit.
You can see here some visual exploration of one of our earlier factions. But I want to stress, not every faction would adopt this art style, and there will be a gamut from dark and serious to cute and silly and probably even dangerously sexy.
Now this dude's starting to speak my language. Dangerous and sexy. You gotta have big boobs and huge swords. Exactly what we need. This will drive up sales. One does not simply make a new MMO without having chicks with huge swords and even bigger boobs. No way, dude. It doesn't happen. Just for fun, I plugged the words dangerous sexy into an image generator, and this is what came up. And I can't say that I disagree with that assessment. So there are two questions that I want to go over real quick that was asked during this video. And the first one is a really dumb one. Will there be tanks? Yeah, there's going to be tanks. But the guy did a solid for the audience and talked about tanking in general and how aggro and threat works, and I'll just let him go over that.
Yes, there are certainly going to be tanks in our game, but I think we want to look at and revisit what tanks mean to the group in terms of gameplay, right? What do they do on a second per second basis? Does the boss always have to be hitting them or their tank buddy? Could it just be that there are key moments where the tank needs to be there to defend their team against a huge attack? Or is it possible that there's just a big guy in the group that, like when you see Marvel's Endgame, that the Hulk's got to match up with the big brute of Thanos' crew there. So just trying to find, and explore different options there. And that could mean that we have, some tanks that are in melee as they traditionally are. Maybe we have pet class tanks. Maybe we have range tanks. I don't know. It'd be cool to hear what you all think about those types of things. And when we do experiments and explore that, have you try them and see what you think.
There we go. This guy gets it. I've already covered this in one of my previous videos of what I want to see in an MMO. The bosses that don't go by aggro and threat meters and you got to have a main tank, and then he's got to show up every day right on the dot, or else you can't raid because he's got the best gear in the guild. It's ridiculous. Like the drain on the person's life that it puts on them is absurd. The pressure is absurd. There shouldn't be a main tank. There should just be tanks running around acting as goalies, blocking certain attacks throughout the party, throughout the raid. Just kind of Johnny on the spot, like a goalie, looking to defend any incoming attacks towards the squishies, and that's how it should work. And this guy seems to get that, and that is huge. That is huge. I've never heard a developer say things like this before, and it definitely boosts my hopes for this game.
It seems like Blue Shards are their own survival game base builder that's separate from the MMO. Why can't this exist in the Red Shards or vice versa?
I think the superpower of our game is in the blue shards. And when we say that you're going to play blue shards, it could mean that you're just playing one blue shard for the entire season or the entire expansion, just like building and decorating your base and killing monsters and stuff like that. But it can also mean that you're playing several blue shards. You could play hundreds of blue shards or maybe even just dozens. The idea behind blue shards is that we're always going to give you a lot of variety. So we love exploration. We love the exploration element of survival games. And since these blue shards are kind of generated just for you and your party, we can always throw some cool, like wacky surprises at you. Like, what if it hailed razor blades and you had to keep shelter nearby? Or what if the world was just slowly crumbling around you and you had to like collect as many resources as you can and get the hell out before it falls?
Wow, okay, so we're gonna have building mechanics like a survival game, which takes a ton of time, and people like to spend a ton of time on their houses to make them all look fancy. And it's just, and all these new mechanics, like what, Razor Rain, like in freaking Gears of War, which was a badass section of the game, I thought, even though it was irritating, it was still cool. Uh, Man, that's just a lot of development time and a lot of focus on these blue shards, which just means all the more that people are going to be spending a ton of time in these blue shards by themselves, and then that means that the red shards are going to wind up being ghost towns. It's just making it worse. The more time and development time they put into these blue shards, the more things there are to do in these blue shards, the worse it is for the red shards because they're splitting their player base up. You know? They're just dialing it in, man. Just making sure nobody really plays the red shards. Okay, cool.
So one is like the exploration angle. Two is the shared progression. We love shared progression in survival games. So things like upgrading your crafting bench so that everyone else can use that crafting bench and like submitting your recipes to it and like that sense of community that you really only get in survival games. And now imagine you can take that character, you can take that community and then like inject that into the traditional MMO that has all the raids and dungeons. And you're getting like a mix of your gear from both of these blue shards that you're investing in, that you're playing multiple of, and then the red shards that you're more used to doing things like instant story, dungeons, raids, world bosses, all the cool stuff. Like we really want to concentrate the cool stuff about like the open world experience so that we can kind of like divide the experience between like, here's your exploration loop and here's your like static loop.
Honestly, the more this chick talks about this crap, the more it sounds like they're trying to build an MMO with the red shards, and then a single player slash co op game with the blue shards, and then have some sort of shared uh, progression between the two where they both affect each other. You know, I also don't. What is she talking about with the shared community? Because you're upgrading your crafting bench, which is on the blue shard, which other people can only use if you invite them to your shard. So where's the shared community with the crafting bench? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't give a flying crap if somebody can use my crafting bench or not. Honestly, I would rather they don't in an MMO because I may be further ahead than them, and now them using my crafting bench helps them catch up to me faster, and I don't want to do that. Forget them. I don't care about them. I only care about myself and my character and my guilds, right? I don't care about anybody else that's not in my guild. So that's ridiculous. So that's my take on what they had to say in this video. The important bits to me. There's a heck of a lot more. The thing's way too long. I did not want to cover the entire thing. This video would be like an hour long or something like that. So I just went for the important stuff, which was mostly at the beginning of the video. I don't think that these shards are gonna work as well as they are imagining things. They're seeing it go better in their head than what's actually gonna play out in real life. It's like you're a little kid and you're getting picked on, and you envision, doing the ninja flip and kicking the bully in the face. But then when you actually try it, that's not how it works. You just land on your head and then you get your freaking face stomped in, you know? So, yeah, it's not going to go as well as they think. I think it's going to wind up just killing their world for the most part, and people are going to gravitate towards the blue shards, even though they wouldn't naturally. They probably don't like it, but because it exists, they're gonna use it. You know, if you build it, they will come. If you freaking build these blue shards and put these blue shards in there, people are gonna play the blue shards. And if you make them as badass as she was theory crafting here, as they might make them, then it sounds like they're gonna be super fun. In which case, there's nobody gonna be doing the red shards at all. But just turns into a single player game or a co-op game instead of an MMO because you hardly ever need to go to the red shards. And when you do, you just go there just to do the quests or the raid or whatever, and then you go straight back to the blue shards. So now, again, you wind up with an empty world. And why are you even bothering to make it an MMO at that point? You may as well just put everything into the blue shards. It's not an MMO. It's a single player slash co-op game similar to like Elden Ring or something like that. And then you release it like that. You know, so why are you doing that? It reminds me of what Fortnite when it first came out. It was a zombie game and you know whatever you're gonna be fighting against waves of zombies. Okay, and then suddenly they made it a freaking battle royale, and then everybody stopped playing the original version of Fortnite, and everybody's only playing the battle royale version, and they just completely nixed that part of the game out completely. You know, so then at that point it's like, well, why'd you spend all that development time to begin with? You wasted your time. You should have just made it a battle royale from the start. It should always be concerning anytime developers are using resources and time to develop a part of a game or a system in a game that winds up being useless. You know, it's like Ashes of Creation with their taxing system. You know, they don't need that taxing system. Who the hell sits there at their computer thinking, man, if only I could pay taxes in a video game. I look forward to paying taxes every year so much already. It's so much fun when tax season comes around that I just, man, if only somebody would just make an MMO where I can constantly pay taxes all the time. Can't wait to use that system. Like, nobody does that. You know, nobody likes paying taxes. Nobody likes the idea of their hard earned money going to other people that they don't know and they don't have any control over how that money is spent. Somebody else makes that decision for them and there's nothing they can do about it. You know, nobody likes that. So, yeah, it's concerning. And this whole shard thing is super concerning for me. That's a lot of tech that's going to go into that, making that work. And I just don't think it's going to go that well. And I think they're going to wind up wasting their development time. Time that they could be spending elsewhere, you know, making other systems better and more fleshed out. I'm sure some of you will have some creative things to say, so leave those colorful comments in the comment section below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe so that you can keep leaving your well thought out comments in the future comment sections of my videos, and I will see you in the next one.